Hello, I'm Callie, and last year I read 50 books. So today I want to go through them all in order from my least favorite to my top favorites, and tell you a little bit about each one. To help us with that, I have my bullet journal where I literally ranked them all in order and printed out little pictures of all the books. So I'll be referring to this during the video. My least favorite book of the year is actually a classic book. It is Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. I had to read this for school, as many people do, and I heard some good things about it online, but the story itself was just very strange, and I did not have an enjoyable experience reading it. A lot of times I was confused as to what was going on. I understand why it's an important book to talk about, and I enjoyed the discussions we had in class, but the reading part itself was not my favorite. The next book is the only other 1-star I have for this year, luckily, and this is The Prized Girl by Amy K. Green. My mom actually found this book at the dollar store, and we were thinking, wow, what a great deal, $1 for a book. It was not a great deal. I would have much rather not read this, but I do appreciate her getting it for me. Basically, the story was about there was the older sister, Virginia, and a younger sister who was in a lot of beauty pageants and everything, and the younger sister got killed. And the older sister's kind of roped into the investigation, so it sounds like an interesting premise, but none of the characters were likable. The main character was Virginia, and she did not like her sister. She was an alcoholic, and I just did not like hearing from her perspective. At first I thought it was interesting from the younger sister's perspective, but then she turned out to be not likable as well, and there was no one I was rooting for in this book. And it also is very weird, since a lot of the suspects were all these older men, and it was oh, okay. So, the only 2 1-star books of the year. The next book I don't have, so I'll put a picture up somewhere. And this was another book I had to read for school, and it was The Importance of Being Earnest by Oscar Wilde. This book I gave 2 stars. It was an okay book. There wasn't anything wrong with it. It was kind of funny in parts, but it just wasn't my favorite overall. Yeah, it was just an okay book. Nothing special. And the next book I might have, do I have it? I think it was my sister's, and I borrowed it from her afterwards, so I don't think I have it. No, I don't think I have it with me, but it was called The Goldfish Boy. It was an interesting book. There was nothing wrong with it. It was about this boy who he didn't like germs, and he just kind of trapped himself in his room and didn't want to go out. And it was a middle grade book, so it was kind of below my reading level, so I feel like I would have enjoyed it more if I was younger, but at this point in my life, I'm reading more young adult, so 2 stars it is. That was the opposite problem of this one. This one was more adult, but in a very weird way. So that one also wasn't for me. And the next book I got for my friend for my birthday, and I wanted to love this book because it's by her favorite author. But it also just wasn't for me. It was The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. Let me get it out. This one also had the same problem as The Goldfish Boy, where it was middle grade. And it was an interesting book. I liked how there were illustrations in it. It was about a boy named Bod or Bode, and he was raised in a graveyard by ghosts, which it was an enjoyable book. I had fun while I was reading it, but it just wasn't as good as the other ones for me. And since it was middle grade, it was a little bit younger. So that's why it's 2.5 stars. The next book I got from the library, and I was so excited because the cover was so beautiful. It's Lake's Edge. Put up a picture again because it's a library book, so I don't have it. And it looked so good. It's about this girl who her brother had dark magic, so her and him were whisked away to this gothic manor, and he had to help stop these shadows from overtaking it, and there was a bit of a love story too. But it just wasn't interesting. It was at first, and I was really enjoying the beginning, but then it was just the same thing over and over again. Okay, we gotta stop this darkness, someone almost dies, something almost happens, and then back to normal. Okay, we gotta do this, and at the end there's something big that's supposed to happen, and to the main character, but I knew she was gonna be fine, because that's how it always goes. If they really would have gone big in that direction, I don't want to spoil too much, then I would have thought it was so brave and would have liked it better, but it just was a struggle to get through. So that was Lake's Edge, 2.5 stars. And the next book was a pretty interesting book. It was The Gilded Wolves, and I know a lot of people love this book, But I feel like since I'm not as much into history, and this was like a historical fiction fantasy, I found it to be like an interesting concept. And they had to solve a bunch of puzzles, but you wouldn't be able to solve those puzzles unless you knew history. And I wanted to solve these puzzles. The cast of characters was interesting, but I don't remember any of them standing out really to me. So, yeah. The next book I also had to read from school, The Kite Runner. Let me get it out. Here it is. And this one was definitely more interesting out of the two I had to read. Since I took AP English, I had to read these two over the summer. I read this one first, so then when this one came along, I was like, okay, this is better. I can get through it. I like reading it more. But it just, again, was like a historical fiction. It was interesting to learn about Afghanistan from these characters' perspectives. But there was just like parts of the book that got really dark, that I knew they were trying to create a conversation, and it was good to have conversations about the book, but it did not make the reading experience enjoyable. And the main character, he was very unlikable at times, at a lot of times, and a lot of people in my class agreed with that. But it was better than Brave New World, so yay! Also, my English teacher this year is amazing. I love her so much. Okay, so next is a Wings of Fire book. I also have this book. I think I need to move these books to get it out. And here it is, The Flames of Hope. If you knew me in real life, you would know I love Wings of Fire. It was a series in middle school that I was absolutely obsessed with. I read the whole series, well, most of the series, like 4 times. I loved it so much. But I feel like I'm just growing out of it, which is so sad. So I rated this book 3.5 stars because it was a good book. But again, it's middle grade, and I just am partial to the original cast of characters. And this is the 3rd arc. It's the 15th book now. And there are some books that are so good, but the last book I liked even less, which is this book here. I didn't read it this year, but I mean last year because we're in 2023, but I read this in 2021, and I liked it even less, but it's just really sad because this is a series that I love so much. I literally even tried to create a movie out of it when I was in middle school and like cast all my friends in different roles. I was going to be Tsunami and Queen Scarlet, and like I started drawing it all out, storyboarding it. I was obsessed. And now it's just, I'm outgrowing the series, and it's sad, but this was still an enjoyable book, and I would definitely recommend it if you are still in middle school and you still like these types of stories. The next book my friend lent me, it was Circe. It was good, but I'm not as into like Greek goddesses and everything, and it was slow at times since it took place over like thousands of years. I don't remember exactly how much, and I don't remember much from the story again. I just remember she was the goddess, she was trapped on an island all alone, and like people came to her island and left, and like she didn't have very good family life. I don't remember much, so 3.5 stars. This next book I had to read for an essay, actually, that I had to write for a scholarship for my National English Honor Society, and it was Beautiful Country. And it was a really interesting book about a Chinese immigrant and her life experience. It was a memoir. And I really enjoyed like reading it and hearing about her experience, but it didn't kind of compare to the types of books that I like to read. I guess you'll see it the further we go on. The higher up books are more like fantasy. Yeah, actually mostly fantasy. There might be a few dystopian thrillers, mysteries, things like that, but mostly my genre is fantasy, so memoirs and everything, although they're well written and good, do not compare to the types of books that I enjoy normally. So next we have Grave Mercy. Where is it? Here we go. And I actually remember really enjoying this book when I first read it. I think I ranked it higher than I have it down now, which I have it at 3.5 stars. And that's because it just wasn't as memorable as some other books. Like, I don't remember the first character's name. I remember she was like an assassin or something, but she was kind of like a nun almost. They didn't call it that in this world, but she was raised by a church for this like god who sent them these like nun people after to kill people. This is not a good description. If you want to know the description of this book, look it up. But I remember enjoying it so much at the time that I asked for the second book, which I have here, which I still have not read. And it's a lot thinner. And I think it follows a different character. But I might someday get to this, because this still was an enjoyable read. I just really don't remember anything. And I do remember this is a historical fantasy, which I guess you see the trends. I don't like historical stuff. That's my least favorite subject in classes, but I like fantasy, so I gave it a try, and my friend read it, and she enjoyed it. And I know there was romance involved, but I don't remember anything about that for the life of me. I just remember there being some big thing at the end. I don't remember much about that either. Okay, the next one is King of Scars, which I also remember. I read this at the beginning of last year, and I remember liking it when I read it, and this, if you don't know, it's kind of goes off of a character from the Grishaverse, from Shadow and Bone and Six of Crows. It goes off of a few characters, actually. Nikolai, Nina, was that it? And Zoya. And I really like that world, and I loved Six of Crows. It was one of my favorite books ever. And I really love Shadow and Bone as well. And although I really liked the world and the characters, this just felt slower for some reason. And interesting that they mash these characters together, but their stories don't really cross ever. They're in their own sections. And I have the next book, but I can't read it yet because I don't remember much of what happened in this book. So sometime I'll get to this. Don't know if it will be this year, don't know if it will be next year, but sometime. So that's King of Scars. I also gave it a 3.5. I think at first I gave it a 4, but then as the year went on, I was like, okay, give it down half a star. Half a scar, King of Scars. The next book I actually read in 2 days. I don't remember what was going on that weekend or if I had a lot of time, but it was called Past Perfect Life. I got it from the library, and I think at the time, same sort of thing with King of Scars, where I rated it 4 stars originally, but then I bumped it down half a star now, so now it's 3.5 stars. It was a really interesting concept, and I flew through the book. It was really easy to read. I thought it was going to be more thriller-ish. It was about this girl who realized that she lived with her dad alone. She thought her mom died, but then she realizes that her dad really took her from her mom and like drove off to this small town, and FBI agents are coming, and she's kind of forced to live with her mom and while her dad goes to jail. But she loves her dad and she loves her life there and she doesn't want to leave. And it was just about her internal struggle and all of that instead of like more of a thriller. It just wasn't as much what I expected, but it was an easy read and I did enjoy reading it. 3.5 stars are the books where I'm like, okay, I'm glad I read them. I enjoyed reading them. The next was a thriller I read. I was in a big, like, thriller phase during October, I think. I was trying to have the vibes be all spooky. This one was good. It just was like a lot of other books. It was called The Agathas, and it was kind of this one girl disappears for a summer and then she comes back, and it follows her perspective and another person's perspective. And they made the person out to be very obvious until it wasn't that person, but you never would have suspected the other person, but not in like, oh my gosh, I never suspected that, in a where was the build up to this person sort of way. So that was the only qualm I have with that, but it was an interesting time, and I did enjoy reading it at the moment. Okay, now we're getting into my 4-star books with the next book. It's called Deepfake, and my sister actually lent me this book as well, and I'm glad she did, because it was enjoyable. I don't remember the main characters' names. I guess that's what I get for reading 50 books. But basically, there's 2 characters. They're academic rivals, but they're dating. Or they did date. It's kind of like a past, present, like flipping through that and flipping from perspectives, which was really interesting and built the tension up. So I enjoyed that. But there's a video of this one, of the girl saying about that the boy cheated on the SAT. And she claims she did not say that, she did not make that video, and someone must have like faked it. And the boy doesn't know what to believe, so they like break up, and they have like, it's basically their experience trying to uncover the truth. Did she really say that? Did he really cheat on the SAT? Did someone else fake it? Was it a deep fake? It's kind of that whole mystery, and it was very intriguing, so that's why it's 4 stars. The next book I got from the library, so again, I can't show it, picture somewhere. It's called Winterwood by Shea Earnshaw. So a little bit of a spoiler for further down in the 5-star reviews, but I rated one of her other books 5 stars, and I was hoping that this book would be a 5-star too. And it wasn't, but I did have an enjoyable time reading it. Shea Earnshaw, from the 2 books I have read, seems to write a lot of like witchy, like, a little bit of magic in a place that's set on Earth. So this girl, her family are witches, basically, but they only get, like, one power. So that they call a nightshade, and she doesn't have one, so she thinks it's died out and everything. But she lives up in the snowy part of, I don't even know where, was it Vermont? Maybe, who knows, Maine? Basically, she lives near a camp for like wayward boys, and they get sent to this camp, and one goes missing, and she finds him in the woods. But another one is apparently murdered, and she doesn't know if he is connected to that because he can't remember anything, and there's a little bit of a romance there. It was pretty good. It was very enjoyable, well written. It just wasn't as good as her other book, and yeah. So that was Winterwood for 4 stars. The next one I also rated 4 stars. I got from the library. It was Violet Made of Thorns. When I was rating these, I think I just finished reading some of these, so I think now I might rate Violet Made of Thorns a little bit down more, but it was a good book when I read it. So basically, it was a girl named Violet. This is fantasy world, and she's basically she can see the future, and so she's employed by the king of this place to see the future and read people's threads, which I thought was really cool, that she could, like, touch people's hands and see, like, threads and paths of their futures, but she doesn't know where it would be. But since she's not as good of a future teller than the last one, she kind of has to lie her way through things, since she can see a lot of different futures but doesn't know which one is going to come to pass. So there was a prophecy from the last one that said that the prince's wife would, like, either cause ruin or, like, salvation for the kingdom. So she makes a prophecy that the prince will meet his wife before the end of this journey at this ball, and it kind of unfolds from there, and there's a little bit of a romance between her and the prince, but it was an enjoyable book. Good enough, but I don't remember too much. And what I didn't blow me totally away, but I had a fun time. The next one, for some reason, I almost forgot to rank. Like, I was doing these books on here, and I forgot to print out one of that. So, I don't know if that says something about it, but it was a good book. It was called Lost in the Neverwoods, and when I checked it out of the library, I didn't even realize it was a Peter Pan retelling, but it is a Peter Pan retelling. The author who wrote it is more notably known for the book Cemetery Boys, but I have not read that book yet. I just have read this book, and it was a good time. The girl Wendy, she was lost in the woods, the Neverwoods, for like a year with her brothers, and she came back, but her brothers didn't. And then she sees this boy who she remembers from her mother's story as Peter, and he's like, "You need to help me, my shadows got loose, and now more kids are going missing into the woods." So it's kind of a mystery, but not really, but she's got to figure out what happens, and it was good. I feel like the beginning was very strong, the end was very strong, the middle was just, like, dragged a bit. I don't know. Aw, now we're getting to some books that I look back very fondly on. So I have They Both Die at the End, which was such a good book. My friend lent me this again, so thank you so much, Brindley. And basically it was about these 2 boys who live in a world, I'm sure you guys probably heard of this book by now, but they live in a world where they're called, like, the day that their death is happening. So basically these 2 boys' lives get entwined together, and they go throughout the day, and you know they're gonna die at the end, but even when it comes, it's so sad. I cried, and then I cried retelling what happened to my mom, like, months later. I was telling her about the book, and I started crying while I was talking about it. So if that doesn't tell you how good it is, then I don't know what will. The next book is a book that I actually read with my mom earlier in this year. It was, like, very, very early into the year. I used to do this thing where, like, I would read a chapter past to my mom and she would read a chapter, but we stopped that because our lives got busy. Let me see if I can find it. Where is it? This will be embarrassing. Oh, found it. Okay, Zero Day. This was another thriller-ish book. So I guess you can say that mysteries and fantasy are my top favorites this year. But this year I got into mysteries a lot more. basically about this girl who she was the president's daughter, but she wasn't the president's daughter when this happened. So when she was younger, she goes missing. Her father's like a governor at that time. But now her father's in the White House and she mysteriously returns. And you don't know if you can trust her. It kind of is like flashbacks to what happened after she was kidnapped. Now she's back. Is she a spy for someone? What's going on? And it's very mysterious. And also she has a friend, and some of it's told by him. There's also a little like romance there, but he doesn't know if he can trust her again, but he's tasked with like seeing if he can trust her. And I just remembered her name was Addie, so that is who that is. Because sometimes after you read like 50 books, you forget the main characters' names. You just remember it was a good book. So this was Zero Day. I do recommend it. Also, I got this from my aunt because she teaches at a middle school and apparently someone left it in her classroom one day and she asked if I wanted it. So, sorry, Kaden, whoever that is, but I have your book now. The next one was another book I got from the library. I kind of was obsessed with this author this year. She has a lot of like 4-star of my books. Karen McManus's You'll Be the Death of Me. If you have heard that name before, it's probably from One of Us is Lying, which you'll see that book higher up, but she also wrote a bunch of other like YA murder mysteries. So this was a fun one. It was like 3 kids who they skip school one day and they go to the city. I forget what city, but basically they haven't seen each other for years, but they were friends in middle school. But then they witness a murder and they're all kind of connected to it and they don't know who did it, so they're trying to figure out who did it. And yeah, it was a really fun book. That's also 4 stars. And the next one is One of Us is Next, which comes after One of Us is Lying. It was also a good book, but again, like, it's not as memorable as the first one. Sometimes you gotta judge books on how memorable they were. Like, right after you're like, oh, that was such a good book. But then a month later, if you don't remember much of it, and you're like, okay, this one was more memorable, so this one's higher up. Sort of like that. But I know that the one character was Bronwyn from the first book's younger sister. Maeve? Yeah, I think that's her name. And basically there's this Truth or Dare app where they have to do a dare or a truth will get leaked about them, and it's just wreaking havoc across everyone's lives, and then someone dies from one of the dares and they're trying to figure out who is doing this Truth or Dare app. And now that I'm thinking about it, I don't quite remember who it was, but I just remember enjoying this. And the next book was another fantasy. It was called Crown of Oblivion. So this book was really good, but there were a few things that I remember having problems with after it. Like plot holes. I don't quite remember them now, but one might come to mind when I'm talking about it. So it was about a girl who, she lives in a world where there's people who are like, not indentured servants to the other people just because they got to the land later. This was like a while ago. So they have these like implants in them, and she's basically a servant to the princess, and whenever the princess does something wrong, she pays for it. Like they're the one who like whip her and punish her for whatever the princess does. And basically her father is like dying, so she decides to enter this tournament that will get freedom for her and all her family, but only the first person who passes the finish line gets freedom. And many people die along the way, and also all the other people get years added onto their indenture if they don't win. So it's very, very risky. But she decides to do it, and they get drugged with this like drug called Oblivion, where they forget all their memories, but they like come back in waves throughout the book. So she's trying to do all these tasks. I think an issue I had with it is she was never figuring them out for herself. Like sometimes she did, but she randomly got a lot of help for no reason or stumbled into it, and her love interest actually found a lot of the clues, and they were kind of like, he would give her the clues for help, and it just didn't seem like she was capable of doing it by herself. Yet, oh, I guess if you want spoilers, I'll put one to, if you don't want spoilers, I'll put where to skip to. Yet she was the one who won the race, even though she kind of stumbled into this victory. And somehow I think the love interest also got pardoned. Yeah. Oh, yeah, and you realize that the love interest was, like, basically the person who was indentured to the prince. So she was indentured to the princess and like the princess's surrogate, and he was indentured to the prince, and she hated him because he would take the whip from the prince and like whip her, but he was like, I was doing it to help you because the prince would kill you. And I was like, that's a little weird. Okay. And also that guy ended up having like a romance with the princess, I think. Yes, this is the plot hole. Okay. I enjoyed the book, but all these plot holes made it 4 stars instead of 5. Basically, he was part of this underground organization that were like rebelling against it. And somehow the king and queen knew that? Or the king knew that. Because the princess was like in trouble for having a romantic relationship with someone from the rebellion. Yet they find out that that person was the love interest. I'm not explaining this well, but it just made no sense. Like, why wouldn't they kill him if they knew he was part of the rebellion? I don't know. Anyway, next book, A Forgery of Roses. I really liked this book because of the magic system. This is also 4 stars, by the way. Basically, these people would, like, paint, and when they painted, they could paint over what the person looked like. So if they had, like, a broken leg, they'd paint over the leg and make it look normal, and their intention would, like, make the leg not broken anymore and heal the people. But basically, then that person would take on the injury themselves, or the feeling of the injury. Not the physical broken leg, but it would feel like her leg was broken as she walked. And I thought that was really interesting. And this governor, who does not like magic, does not like any of these people who can do that, his son dies. So his wife secretly finds the main character and takes her to the manor and is like, you gotta paint my son back to life or else. And she's like, I can't paint anyone back to life. That's not how far my abilities go. But it's either that or, like, she'll give her up and her magic abilities to the governor, and then she will be put in jail for the rest of her life. So she has to try. And there's, like, a plot twist that's pretty good. Also, like, a romance with the other son of the governor. And it was just an enjoyable book overall. So now, oh, if I still had this book, I just returned it to the library today, so I can't hold it up. But now we're into the Truly Devious series. So basically all these books I kind of lumped together into one, because they're all like right after another, but where they are in this order is different. So first is the 4th book, Box in the Woods. Next is the 2nd book, Vanishing Stair. Next is The Hand on the Wall, which I think is the 3rd book. And then the 1st book I liked best, which was Truly Devious. So it's about this girl named Stevie, and she goes to this academy, Ellingham Academy, and she loves true crime. And there was the person who founded Ellingham, his wife and his daughter were both murdered. So the school shut down for a while, but now they're reopening it again. Well, it was reopened, like, a few years back. So she puts in an application, and she goes there, and her whole thing is, I want to solve the murders. So she starts to investigate them, and then someone else dies, and it makes it seem like it's an accident, like someone else nowadays. But she doesn't think it's an accident, and all these weird things are happening. It was really good. So the first 3 books in the series are kind of about the Ellingham story, and I thought that was really good. So I have the 1st book rated best because that was like the first book where it all started, and I really like that. And then the 3rd book was my next favorite because that's where all the reveals come in, and it's like, oh, this is what happened from this is what happened from this. And then the 2nd book was next in my favorites because it was kind of just the middle book, but it was enjoyable. And then the 4th book was its whole story entirely, The Box in the Woods. I just finished reading that, and it was Stevie and her friends go to a summer camp where these kids, like, years before were killed and put, like, in a box in the woods. That's why it's called Box in the Woods. And she's tasked to solve the murder, which was fun. It was like, I feel like I would have enjoyed it more in the summer because it was a very summery summer camp book. But I actually read it when my family went to Dollywood in the lines. It was a good time passer. Like, we had to wait in a 3-hour line, and I'm, like, reading my book and passing the time. It was a little distracting, but one of the ride attendants yelled down and was like, what book are you reading? And I was like, it's called The Box in the Woods. And he was like, is it good? I don't know if this is holding up the line or not, because I'm pretty sure you're supposed to check seatbelts, but who knows? But I was yelling back up to him a little bit about what it was about. And then when I got up to the top of the ride and they were like checking everyone's seatbelts. He's like, so should I read that book? And I was like, yeah, you should, but it's the 4th book, so probably start with the 1st book. Okay, now we only have this many books to go. Oh, and my 5-star reads, but this many books for the non-5-star reads. So the next book is The Prison Healer, and surprisingly, I actually have it. This was a good book. I read it in the middle of the year. I think I got it down when we went to my aunt's beach house. So it's about a girl. Let's see, I can find her name. Kiva, that was the girl's name. She basically was like in a prison camp because her dad and her were like accused of being part of the like rebel organization against the king and the queen. So because her dad was a healer, he gets to be the prison healer. So he starts to teach her, so that way she doesn't have to work more of the like menial jobs of like lifting rocks and like all these different things where people die. So she's kind of safe healing the people who are kind of like dying and everything. So then after a little while, this isn't really a spoiler because this happens early in the book, her dad dies. This happens before the story starts. So she is the new prison healer, hence the name, The Prison Healer. And this boy comes in and she has to basically like prepare the people, make sure their wounds are good and dressed before they go in. And that boy's basically very much like cares about her, wants her to be safe, and she is kind of like a little bit of a romantic connection. But then there's a big like plot twist at the end. But before that, the rebel queen comes in and she's like so sickly, so frail, she can't really do anything, but yet they are putting her on like a trial where she has to do the trial of the 4 elements, whatever it's called. So Kiva somehow decides to take her place. And you're not quite sure why she would risk her life, because apparently you can only complete these trials if you have the elemental magic that the kings and queens have. And the rebel queen thinks she should be the rightful ruler because she's related to the other people. And you're like, why are you risking your life, Kiva? But it all comes together at the end, and it's so good, and it leaves kind of off on a cliffhanger plot twist, and I can't wait to read the 2nd book, which I actually just got today. And I got it in hardcover for $2. My library was having a sale, and yeah, I got this book for $2. I'll probably talk about this at a different video though, so I'm just gonna put this to the side for now. The next book is another thriller. I think I read this very early on last year, and I think it was the first thriller that I read. Let me see, where is it? Yeah, I got this for Christmas, not last Christmas, but the Christmas before, and my sister borrowed it, and that's what happened. But we're not going to talk about that. Basically, my mom and my sister got this book for her teacher as like a present when she was in 5th grade. And I read the back and I was like, that sounds so good. So I decided to ask for it and I got it. And it was the perfect time to read it because it was all wintry. And my friend also read this too, and I think she enjoyed it. Not as much as me, because this is the first of the 4.5 stars, and I think my friend rated it 4 stars, but pretty good. The only qualms I have with this is there was a plot twist that I'm like, what? Why was that not addressed? But other than that, it was so good. It was the first thriller I read. I loved the suspense, because I don't like horror books, so I didn't know if I would like thrillers. But thrillers are so different. They're so good. It's like so much suspense and tension, but without like being scared. I guess you can be scared of like stalker people and murderous people, but somehow I'm not as scared as those as I am like horror creatures. So yeah, this is about a girl. She has like some stalker, and she gets in line with, she goes on an airplane, but then the airport gets shut down, and she decides to get into a car with this one girl that she sat next to on the plane, as well as 3 other people that girl just met. So they're all strangers, and they're all in a car together, and mysterious things are happening, and people have secrets that they don't want to reveal, and maybe one of them is even worse than having just a secret they don't want to reveal. So that's 5 Total Strangers. The next book is another Karen M. McManus book. It's The Cousins. I also got this from the library. And although it wasn't a murder mystery, I really enjoyed this book. So there's like 3 people who are cousins. There was Millie, Jonah, I forget the other girl's name. It's probably like Emily or Hannah or something like that. Some like name like that. But basically their parents were disinherited from their grandmother. Their grandmother was really rich, has her own private island. But basically she cut them off, said, you know what you did. And the parents claimed they did nothing. But the children aren't so sure of that. And now they're invited to the island to get back together. And they're basically trying to solve, why were they invited here? What did their parents do? Especially since the grandmother doesn't seem to really want them there. So did she even invite them? Was it someone else? It was just really good, and the reveal was really good as well. Next book, I also borrowed from my sister, but I still have this on my bookshelf. Maya, if you're watching this, I will give it back to you if you ask for it. But it's here for now. It's Wild Bird, and originally I didn't think I would like this book as much. It's about a girl, she's like a recovering drug addict, basically, and she has to go to this wilderness camp and survive out there. And I thought I wouldn't like it that much, but I ended up loving it. It was really good, really well written. Obviously I have never experienced those struggles before, but I just like her arc and how she was recovering, and at first she didn't want to be there, but then she loved being there and she started adjusting to life. And yeah, that's Wild Bird. And then was like a romance with a bit of fantasy in it, like a bit of magical elements. And I don't normally go for just straight up romance, but the fantasy elements dragged me in. This one I also just returned to the library, so I don't have it to hold it up again, but it's Flirting with Fate. I think the girl's name was Ava. Yeah. Oh yeah, and the boy's name was like Ryan, because his full name was Orion, which is an interesting name, but we'll go with it. This girl, she lives in a family where whenever her grandmother dies, or like whenever someone in her family dies, who's a woman, I think. So her grandmother is dying, and then she will pass on gifts to each of the younger girls. So Ava and her two sisters want to be there not only to say like goodbye to their grandmother, obviously, but so she can pass down these gifts to them. But when Ava is called, she's like trying to get there, but suddenly she gets into a car accident and with this boy, and she doesn't make it there in time, and she's really upset, and she doesn't think she got her gift. But then suddenly her grandmother's ghost comes back and she's like, I was trying to send you the gifts, but it really went to that other boy you got in a car accident with, so now you have to go and become friends with him and like redo this whole thing again. So she has to go and find the boy, and then obviously there's like a little bit of a romance between them, and I think it was really cute. It was a really enjoyable book, and although I don't like straight up romance, I think they put in enough of like a magical twist that it was good. And maybe I don't dislike romance as much as I think I do nowadays. I really enjoyed that one. Next was a reread. I think it was the only... No. I think I had 2 rereads this year, but this was just so I could continue the book series. So, this was The Demon King. I got this from my friend, the same friend who gave me the Graveyard book, but I enjoyed this one a lot more. Obviously, it's 4.5 stars. A few years back for A Secret Santa, and I read it, and I really enjoyed it. And then I got the second book, and I didn't read it for like a year and a half, 2 years. So obviously I had to reread this book so I could continue on with the series, which now I read 3 of the series, 3 out of the 4 books in the series, and the 4th book is on its way. But those 2 books I read this year, so it does not count in this wrap up. And basically it's about this girl. I keep on saying basically a lot. I'm sorry about that. It's about this girl named Raisa. I don't know how to say her name correctly. And this boy named Han. And Raisa is like the princess of the realm. And Han is like a thief. But he also is related to the clan, which is sort of like Native Americans in this world. And it's sort of how their paths... This is a hard book to explain, because there's not one cohesive story in the first book. It's kind of a setup for the other 2. And the 3rd book was amazing. Spoilers on that, but I rated it 5 stars because I just finished it like a little bit ago, but it was so good. But the first book was kind of the setup to all that, but it was really good as well. The world building is so good in this series. The world feels so real, so like I can picture it, and the history too. And there were a lot of details, so sometimes it was hard to get through descriptions, but not really. Okay, that I gotta stop talking about this, but that was The Demon King. The next book I don't have because I borrowed it from the library very early on this year, but it's by one of my favorite authors ever, and you will see more of her books later in this. But it's Heartless by Marissa Myers. Or Marissa Meyer. I always add the S on, I don't know why, but it's just Marissa Meyer. And it's a retelling of the story of the Queen of Hearts, kind of how she got to be so heartless. Haha, that's the title name, get it? And she kind of has like a little bit of a love story with this guy, the Knave, I think, was it? No, the Jester, Jest, that was his name. And it's kind of like her story through there, but everything's so whimsical, but also like so heartbreaking and sad. And then it like sets up why she's so heartless perfectly. It was a good villain origin story, but it was also so sad. The next book, oh, that was also 4.5 stars. The next book is Lost Stars, which is actually a Star Wars book. And it was a Star Wars like romance love story. And my friend Brindley also let me borrow this. So, wow, so many books she let me borrow. Thank you so much. Love you, Brindley. Okay. And I like Star Wars, but I'm not like a huge, like, super fan. But it was so good. It was about a girl and a boy, and they knew each other then when they were younger. And it's kind of as they grow up, they both go on to different paths. So the girl, I think her name was Sienna, although I might be wrong, she kind of goes on to be part of the First Order. She's a pilot on there. And then the boy goes to be part of the rebellion. And it's kind of like their struggles through that and how they're on opposite sides of the war and they both don't want to leave what they know, but they still love each other. And it was good. As you can see, the romance stories I like have to have a little bit more than just normal. Like this one, sci-fi, Star Wars. The other one, like magical powers, ghost grandma. The next one is One of Us is Lying, which I think I alluded it to being up higher. So this is also 4.5 stars. It was really good, and the plot twist was so good. And my sister borrowed it from her friend, and then I borrowed it from my sister. I asked if she was sure her friend wouldn't mind, and she was like, no, she won't mind. So that's how I read it. It was really good. Or wait, did I borrow it from the library? Either I read it from her friend or I read it from the library. Because I might have started reading it from her friend, but then when she returned it, got it from the library. Either way, that's not important. It's just that this is such a good book. It deserves the hype. I started watching the show but didn't finish it. Because it was a little bit weird. Like, it was sort of like it, but then it wasn't how I imagined it. And it was a little bit changed. And also I read it in book form, and the book's always better. Well, not always, but most of the time. So there's a big plot twist about who did it and if any of them are lying. And you really start to trust all of them, and you're like, who is lying? I don't know who did it. Who killed this guy in detention? Oh, that's what the story is about. This guy dies in detention, and the only other 4 people there are these 4 kids. And they're all separate. So there's like the nerdy one, the jock, the like popular girl, and like the drug addict guy. So they're all very different, but now their lives are intertwined, and maybe one of them is lying about what happened to this kid. And the next book is called 3 Dark Crowns. I actually got the second book for Christmas as well. I remember I had this book out on my desk at school one day, and this girl was like, that book's so good. I was like, yeah, it is. So that was fun to know. There's these 3 different girls. Well, they're not just girls, they're the princesses. They're triplets. And one gets raised in each different place whenever the queen dies. So the queen dies, I guess, when she gives birth to these triplets. And this happens with every queen. And then once they reach a certain age, it's kind of like, I forget what age, but it's kind of like Hunger Games, where they have to kill each other for the throne. So there's the Mirabella. She's the elemental queen, probably the fiery crown there. She can use fire powers, water powers, nature powers. She's very much the strongest of them all. There's Catherine. She's the poisoner, except she's weak to poison. Normally, poisoners can stomach poison and won't die from them, and they, like, eat a bunch of poison stuff, but she can, so she's very weak from poison, but she can make poison very good. And then there's, what's her name? Arsinoe. Arsinoe is the naturalist, so she has this little natural crown here, and basically they have an animal familiar, except Arsenault does not. She does not have an animal familiar. So again, she's sort of like Catherine, where what's wrong? It seems like Mirabella's gonna win, except Mirabella doesn't want to kill her sisters. So it's kind of follows those three in different chapter point of views, and I'm so excited to see what happens in the second book. And then next is another series, all in the same sort of space. I guess because I associate the series with themselves, so it's just which one do I like better. So it's the Caraval series. These are also 4.5 stars. I'm sure you heard a lot of people talk about them this year. They kind of were very popular. And I think, do I have the first one? Yes, I do. I have the first and last one. Funny story about that. But the first one, Caraval, I got this at Barnes & Noble when I was at the mall with my friends one time. But it was really good. I love the world. It is very much like mystical and magical. There's this girl Scarlet and her sister Tella, and basically she gets an invitation to go to the Caraval, which she's wanted to go to for years. So she goes there, except her sister is the one who's trapped in the game, and the goal is to get to her, but she doesn't know who to trust, and she has to like pay for things in different ways without money, like a few minutes of her life or a wish or different things like that. It is very magical, very mystical. It's just so good. And the story continues on in Legendary, which is not next. That's actually my top favorite of them. My next one is Finale, which I have here. And at my library, whoa, my books are like falling down because I'm taking out so many. Look at all them. Look at all these books. But the next one that I have is Finale, which is the finale of the trilogy. And basically, the story of why I have this book is I ordered it at the library. That's where I got Legendary. That's why I only have the first and third book. And I had it on hold for like a month. And no one was turning it in. It wasn't there. No one had it. So then my parents got this for me for Easter. So yay, thank you. Then I could finally read it, and my waiting was done. But this one was my second favorite. I liked how it went back from Tella and Scarlet's perspectives. But I have to say, I'm a little bit partial to Tella's perspective. I really liked her more. Sorry, Scarlet. I liked Scarlet too, though. And then my first one was Legendary, which is the book all about Tella. I can't really say much about the second and third books without spoilers, but just know they were very good. And then the next book was the second book in the Good Girl's Guide to Murder series. I do have that here. Yay! It's Good Girl, Bad Blood. This was really good. I almost gave it 5 stars. I think at first I gave it 5 stars, except I didn't remember it or like dwell on it as much as the other book, which you'll see. Sorry, spoilers. It's a 5 star. And this is the last of the 4.5 and almost made it to the 5 stars. So if you don't know, Good Girl's Guide to Murder is a girl who she's trying to solve this mystery. And I'll go into that later. So now another mystery has come to play where some kid goes missing, and she's trying to help that family and figure out where that kid is. But then through that, she basically figures out there's like another person. I don't know what I can say without giving away spoilers, but it was really good. Same thing with the first book, where I guessed part of it, but part of it surprised me completely. And I think that's the perfect part of a thriller book. To have you be able to guess part of it means that they laid out the clues very good, but then to have you not to know the other part of it gives you like a what moment, which is what you need. Now on to my 5-star reads. Oh, spoilers. But these are in no particular order. So since we were talking about Good Girl's Guide to Murder, I will pull that out because this was so good. This was, after 5 Total Strangers, this was the second murder mystery book I read this year. A girl named Pip. She's basically, for her senior capstone project, she's trying to solve this person's murder, Andy Bell. And this person, what was his name? Sal Singh, who was her boyfriend, was charged with that murder, but she does not think that he did it, but he can't say anything because he like died and people think he took his life, but she also doesn't believe that. So she goes up to Ravi, which is Sal's brother, and basically partners with him to try to figure out what really happened. It is so good. Again, like I said with the second book, I predicted part of it, but the other part blew me away. Highly recommend this book. The next book I do not have. It's called The Wicked Deep. also kind of foreshadowed this at the beginning of towards the beginning of the video. It is a book by Shea Ernshaw, and it was really good. There was also a big plot twist in here that blew me away, and somehow I did not see coming, but then once you know it, you see all the clues that led up to it. It's about a town where there's 3 witches who were like drowned years and years and years ago, like hundreds of years ago, during like the whole witch trials. But apparently every summer they come back and they like take over a girl's body, and then each one drowns a boy to his death. So the main character, oh, I forget her name. How do I forget her? Penny. Okay, the main character, Penny, basically believes that these witches are real, and this boy comes to town who's around the age of the boys who are drowning, and she's like, why are you here? You're in danger. Why did you come to the town at this time? But he doesn't really give her all the information, and she's also kind of holding secrets too, and it's just so good. Just read it. There's like such a big plot twist. And the next books plural, that I'm going to talk about are probably one of my favorite trilogies ever. The Renegade series. I love it so much. Renegade, Arch Enemies, Supernova by Marissa Myers. There's a girl, Nova, a boy, Adrian. Nova's the supervillain, Adrian's the superhero. And Nova infiltrates the Renegades, which are the heroes' quarters, as headquarters, and pretends to be a hero, and Adrian's falling in love with Nova, and Nova likes Adrian, but Nova's like, I'm a supervillain, I can't like this superhero. And Adrian's also the son of these 2 like famous superheroes who are on the council. His one dad's like really famous. He's the one who started the Renegades movement, and Nova's uncle is the person who was like the head of the supervillains before he died. So it basically follows their story throughout these 3 books, and they were so good. I highly recommend. By Marissa Myers. So I did foreshadow this earlier too. And this next book, the final book, wow, we're to the final one. Thank you for sticking around. Okay. It's called The House of Salt and Sorrows. It is a 12 Dancing Princesses retelling, but a dark 12 Dancing Princesses retelling, where each sisters keep on dying and people think there's a curse on them, and the main character, Annalie, is trying to figure out if there actually is a curse, what went on. She thinks her last sister who died was actually murdered, not like from a curse, so she goes through this and tries to figure it out and figure out what exactly is going on. I got this recommended to me from my friend. We were at our local amusement parks, like basically like haunt attractions, and we were in line for one, and we were talking about books, and she was like, there's this really good book that you should read. So I put it on my Christmas list, not last Christmas, the Christmas before, and this was the first book I read in 2022. I started off so good. Started off on a high note. All I gotta say. I had never heard of this book before. She talked about it, and I highly recommend. I even lent it to my one friend, and she loved it too. So, yeah. Thank you so much for watching this whole video. I hope you enjoyed hearing about all the books I read last year. 50 is a lot, so this is probably a long video, so thank you if you made it to this point. And I'll probably post some more videos in the future. Yeah, so if you like books, consider sticking around. I hope you enjoyed. Bye!